Hi, everyone. Welcome. We are just letting people in. So come on in. Welcome, everyone. It'll just be a minute as we welcome everyone to our program this evening. Happy Earth Day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We are so excited to have you here. All right. Welcome, welcome. My name is Sari Kamen. I am the Public Programs Director of MOFAD, the Museum of Food and Drink. Really want to thank everyone for joining us tonight and celebrating Earth Day with us, of course. And it is such an honor to be in this incredible esteemed company of seed savers that we will be hearing from this evening. Just a couple notes, you can probably see that we do have closed captions available for this program, which we're very happy to be able to make this an inclusive program. We are recording, so you have the option tonight of keeping your camera on or off. It's absolutely up to you. Just please note that we are recording this program and we will just keep it archived on our website so anyone can watch it at any time going forward in the future. If this is your first time coming to a MOFAD event, either virtual or in person, welcome. So glad to have you here. And I'm guessing probably a few of you, many of you maybe, have attended virtual events this past year. So of course, we just want to welcome you back and thank you for your support. As you know, this was a free event, and because of our virtual events that have been happening this past year and support from you, that's how we're able to occasionally do these free events, which feel really, really good. And we're really happy to be able to welcome you back. So that being said, please make sure your cameras that can be on or off, please make sure you remain muted. The chat is open, so you can feel free to drop comments throughout. We will have time for more of a dedicated Q&A towards the end, but you can feel free to comment throughout. If there's something you want to ask or a link you want to share, we're really happy to be in community with all of you. So I'm going to pass it over to our panelists this evening who are going to introduce themselves. So let's start with Liz Charlebois.
Hi, and Louise, Elizabeth, and I Wantastiguk, and I Nia Wobanakik. So what I said is, hi, my name is Liz. I live in Brattleboro, Vermont, and I am Abenaki. So a little bit about me. Professionally, I'm a nurse. I work in a local hospital here. My passion, however, is seed saving and caring for Northeast Indigenous seeds and creating foods out of the seeds that I grow. I am a very small scale farmer. And in fact, even right now, I don't even have my own place to grow, so that's sad. But I do have some collaborations with the Dartmouth Organic Farm at Dartmouth College, which is great. And some local farmers grow out stuff for me too. I'm a founding member of the I Collective, and also, I guess by default, in the Indigenous Goddess Gang, of which the I Collective is part of. I'm a former member of the New Hampshire Native American Commission. And see, super involved in my community, and just so excited that everyone can be here today, and so excited to see everyone's face. Thank you.
Thanks. Rowan.
Sego, seguego, ganyak dahawi yung yak. I send my greetings to everyone who's circled up tonight. My name is Rowan White. I introduced you in my Indigenous language, which is Ganyak Geha, and my Mohawk name is Ganyak Dahawe, which means she carries the snow. And I'm currently residing in Northern California, which is the unceded territory of the Nisenan people. We steward 10 acres here, and our home farm is called Sierra Seeds, where we focus on seed stewardship, community, caring for seeds in community, and grow a lot of rare Indigenous and ancestral seeds here for sharing amongst our networks. I also am the program director of the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance, where we work in a very holistic seed to table programming to really leverage resources and provide mentorship and education to grow the Indigenous food and seed sovereignty movement and be good allies in that work all across Turtle Island. And so I'm so grateful to be here. I'm a seed keeper, I'm a mother, I'm a thought leader and a writer, and just grateful to be amongst good people here in the circle and in service to the seeds tonight. So thanks. Yeah.
Thank you, Rowan. And I love seeing where everyone is watching from. It's really beautiful. Noah.
Yeah, Noah Johojifgaros, Stamus Golgolgaroes. Hi everyone, my name is Noah Schlager. I'm a descendant of Muskogee Creek, the Porch Band of Creek Indians in Southern Alabama. I always like to acknowledge my grandma because she's the one who really taught me how to first grow these seeds. And, I'm really great, especially in Southeastern and most Eastern, Indigenous knowledges, seed knowledge is, a matrilineal knowledge and belongs to women. And I always am honored to be on the stage with every one of the, people on this panel. And, just I really appreciate just the knowledge and wisdom that gets, that I'm kind of awkwardly as a guy working in seed stuff, work around. Though men traditionally planted seeds in many cases, so that's sort of the way you sneak in there. But anyways, I am currently the conservation program manager for Native Seed Search, which is a large seed bank based in Tucson, Arizona, on the unceded territory of the Tohono O'odham and Yaqui peoples. And yeah, I mean, we do a lot of work really focused on sustaining and conserving seeds of the indigenous Southwest and Northern Mexico. And yeah, but I do a lot of stuff in other sort of seed worlds as well. So yeah, Mado, thank you all.
Thanks, Noah. We're really glad you're here. Kirby.
Hi, everyone. Good night, Tish. Hati Go Day. My name is Kirsten Kirby Shu, and right now I am an urban farmer and cultural food worker on Anishinaabe land in Wawiatunong, also known nowadays as Detroit. I work with ancestral seeds and keeping their memories alive for the next generations to come. I work with a lot of food revitalization as well, and really showcasing how these seeds have nourished us throughout millennia. And I'm just so honored to be with an amazing circle of seed siblings here today. And yeah, thank you. Good night, Chish.
Thank you. And now I'm just going to turn it over to Jennifer Brandt, who's actually our moderator and host. So she's going to take it away from here. Thank you again, everyone, so much, and enjoy the conversation. Good night.
Hello, everybody. So this is my third program with MOFAD. We started last year, sort of towards the beginning of the pandemic with Indigenous programming. I am Cree from Winnipeg, Manitoba. It's where my mother is from. She was adopted to the States in the 60s scoop, which some of you may or may not know of, and you can look it up. It's a whole other can of worms. So I don't actually have much of language and tradition. So a little bit selfishly, I've used these programs to learn about all kinds of different Indigenous issues and all around food and sovereignty. So it's been really eye-opening for me. And, as I always say to folks who, say these things like a Native American proverb is, no, we're very many people with very different traditions from all over the place. And that's why this is so exciting for me tonight, because we have such a wide range of experiences and nations and sort of ways of doing things. So I'm really excited to, kind of kick this off and kind of think about how seed saving is something, you think about being traditional in the past, something that used to be done and something, maybe ancient, like a lot of people think of Native folks, but it's happening now and it has to be done in the future, for things like climate change, and to really think about the way that we can move forward really respectfully. In the future, we have to see what's going on now, see what's happened in the past, but understand that this is a growing, changing thing. It isn't just one monolithic thing that doesn't change, right? So I really want to kind of, again, not a monolith, and we just really have to kind of be cognizant of that. I'll also say, people were saying where they're from. I am from Vermont originally, but I'm living in Brooklyn. So yeah, it's been very interesting to kind of soak up the different cultures, and I grew up gardening as well. And I want to kind of kick this off with Rowan. She's been doing this for a really long time. She is, such a wealth of knowledge, and I just want to have her give a little bit of context into sort of how it was when she began with the seed saving and where we are now in terms of like her thought process around that. So I'll hand it over to Rowan.
Yeah, well, I came to this work almost 25 years ago as a young woman, and I grew up pretty disconnected from the land, although my relatives always say that I was always like getting into my mom's pantry and getting like cornmeal all over me and getting my hands in the earth. But it was my great grandparents and my grandparents who were the farmers who had continued that legacy of our Mohawk people at Akwesasne, of that tradition of cultivating seed and land. But they were deeply impacted by the boarding school era. And so they were taken away. They had spoken Mohawk as a first language. They carried cultural traditions, but that was taken from them in a very traumatic and violent way. And so my parents' generation didn't speak the language, didn't necessarily engage too much in the cultural traditions, the seed keeping, the gardening. But I had, something, I feel like my ancestors sowed seeds of memory inside of my blood and my bones. And it was something that I just yearned for and, just sort of would look for and had a longing that I couldn't quite describe. And so when I was 17, I left home and I found myself on an organic farm in Western Massachusetts in Amherst. And I ended up apprenticing there. And my mentor, Nancy, had taken me under her wing and seen that I had such an excitement and pleasure in getting my hands in the earth and sprouting seeds. And she entrusted me with the stewardship of this heirloom tomato seed project. And I was so excited and invigorated to make this connection and this discovery that seeds and people had this long, beautiful co-evolutionary connection together. And I remember sitting on this dusty farmhouse floor in New England, sorting through all these heirloom tomato packets and reading the stories and looking through the seed catalogs and learning the provenance and the lineage of these tomato seed varieties. And I remember equal to my joy and enthusiasm to that discovery that people and seeds have, been connected since time immemorial, that I had this grief and this longing that I, as a Mohawk woman, didn't know the foods and seeds that fed my ancestors. And so I made a promise to myself. I have a very visceral remembrance of that day, making a promise to myself that I would go back home to Akwesasne and to other neighboring Haudenosaunee communities, and I would begin to ask elders and ask people in my community, what were those seeds that fed my ancestors? And that's a question and an arc of inquiry that I've been on for 25 years. And I hope, God's willing, I will be on that journey and that pathway for many, many years to come. And I had the great good fortune of many elders entrusting precious bundles of corn and beans and squash and all of these beautiful, nourishing heirlooms that came with stories and songs and cosmologies and lineages. And I apprenticed myself to those seeds and to those foods. And I always say they took me on a very unconventional rites of passage. They became my aunties and my grandmas, and, you know, I had to learn so many things, and in so doing, I began to learn more about what it meant to be a Mohawk woman in my full capacity. And so I have a lot of respect for the ancestors who kept seeds alive against all odds and in the face of such unspeakable atrocities. But that there were foresighted elders who kept those seeds going and waited for young people like myself, and some of the other panelists probably have similar stories, entrusted us with these precious seeds and that cultural memory so that we could be on that threshold of memory, so that we could be those people who didn't forget and who didn't forget what our ancestors endured, so we would have seeds. And then we get to be good future ancestors and responsible descendants who keep seeds alive, because those seeds hold vast importance to who we are as Indigenous peoples in today, and as we move forward to be adaptive in the face of whatever may come our way into the future. So that's a little bit of like the beginning of my seed path, but I will, you know, they will be my trellis of hope and my purpose keepers for the rest of my days. And so I feel really honored to continue to apprentice myself to them and to the land and to the cycles of life. So thank you, Jen.
Yeah, well, that actually segues really nicely into a question for Liz. So Liz had actually spoken at another conference I was doing about food systems, and she had mentioned the traditions that go around, you know, seed keeping and planting, and that, you know, oftentimes she's asked to share them and sort of the reasons why she shares what she does and what she doesn't. So I will let her take it from there.
Thanks, Jen. So yeah, that's a really great point. You know, when it comes to planting and caring for seeds, there is definitely a lot of tradition around that, and a lot of ceremony. And I'm always very careful who I share what information with. I wholeheartedly share my seeds with whoever asks for them. But our ceremonies are our own. And you know, as Rowan mentioned, you know, our ancestors, our grandparents, our great grandparents, you know, they really faced adversity to keep these seeds safe. And those ceremonies go along with that. You know, it's always really a tough discussion with people about, you know, when we can share ceremony and traditions and when we can't. I remember specifically, I went down to Florida to speak at a college, and there was this this group of non-native farmers, really, really nice people, who came to my talk and wanted me to bless their farm. Now, first of all, I'm not an Indigenous person of that area. It's not appropriate for me to take on that responsibility. And the seeds that they were growing were not the seeds of my people. So again, just a lot of discomfort. And then they actually got angry when I said that, you know, they should find an Indigenous person of the land that they were growing on to ask for those prayers. So I find that it's always kind of an interesting conversation with people who don't understand that, you know, even though I'm an Indigenous person, that does not give me the right or ownership, or I guess I'm just not being very articulate, but it doesn't give me a free pass to do anything on this continent. I was a visitor in that land, and therefore it was vastly inappropriate for me to be doing any sort of ceremonial practices of my people there, especially without explicit permission from those people. And I just wanted to touch upon something in regards to like relationships, my personal relationship with seeds. And one of the things that actually an elder of Rowan's taught me, I heard her speak at a conference in Minnesota at the White Earth Land Recovery Project, the Indigenous Farmers Conference. It was Terry Lynn, actually, Grant. And one of the things that she said that really stuck with me and that I carry with me all the time is that you have to have a relationship with your seed. You have to consider it like a marriage. It's a sacred relationship. And those relationships don't form instantaneously. You know, relationships take a lot of hard work, a lot of give and take. And we have as much responsibility to the seeds as they have to us. It's a symbiotic relationship. And if we're not willing to put in the work for that relationship, then it's not going to be successful. So that might have been a little tangential, and I'm sorry.
I like that. No, I think that's great. I think that makes total sense too. And actually, also nicely segues into Noah. So Noah's now currently working with a seed saving company. And I just kind of want to hear his perspective on his experience doing that, give a little context as to why he's doing this, and then sort of like what's working and not working. And probably unmute because I can't hear you.
My like mouse just decided it didn't want to move for a second, but you know. Yeah, no, so, you know, I had actually sort of prior to coming to the Southwest, I was in Connecticut. It's where I first met Liz and did some work with her based in New Haven around growing some seeds out for her and for sort of trying to reconnect a bit with sort of, you know, what an agriculture of that space would look like. And sort of in that process, you know, I really thought a lot about what are sort of the partnerships that you can build between, you know, different entities who want to be growing out seeds, and how do you create a healthy population of seeds so that it's really accessible and can become a part of like daily existence for Indigenous people who may not easily otherwise be able to get things like traditional corn and traditional, you know, medicines and beans and squash and everything else that folks want. So, you know, Native Seed Search has both a big name, but also historically has not always had the best reputation in Indian country. It's, you know, I, you know, in coming here, sort of was aware of the fact that like for a lot of folks, there's a sense of extraction that is perceived here, and that I think is, from my opinion, like is very real. That seeds were not always taken with permission, though they were conserved in many places too. Some of them wouldn't be around if they hadn't been, you know, collected. And so there was also changing definitions of sovereignty and things like that. And all those questions are still so much in the air, still trying to be worked out and figured out. But I think if there's anything core that I've learned, like in all of my work, is just that you have to center, you know, community and Indigenous leadership as sort of the core, so that there's really, you know, a land-based solutions in sort of an in situ, an in place origin, so that those seeds are treated as living beings and relatives, not just as, you know, supply and inventory. And where we recognize that they're not like locked in the past. They, you know, I've liked some folks that like talked about, you know, seeds are just like an Indigenous futurism. They're a promise for the future, because it's this, you're planting a seed, you're imagining a future where you're going to, you know, be eating and saving and, you know, continuing a tradition in that process. And that's a really powerful thing. And it's a powerful symbol of resilience and survivance. So I just think that that's been like one of my favorite things, but it's hard. I mean, I think that, you know, there's a lot of, you know, sensitivities of folks that can be really difficult to work with. I mean, not everyone has, I think seeds bring up a lot of passion in folks. I think people don't recognize all the facts that, you know, seeds are extensions of people. Like those hurt relationships in society can be reflected in those seeds. I mean, you can, you know, to know that, you know, a variety of seed, you know, was targeted by settlers, was burnt down, you know, was a part of violence. You know, you don't have to think about, you know, in the East, you have the same sort of, you know, tension around, think plants like cotton and plants that, get also tied to other forms of oppression, that have happened, on this continent. And I think that that's, when you get into that work, you need to recognize, like, it's not all just beautiful gardens. You're going to start digging into really complex social relationships and dynamics that are still being healed today. And that oppression can also just reconstitute itself in some of those spaces if people aren't really sensitive and really thoughtful and intentional in deconstructing and creating a better system. That's a lot easier said and diagnosed than done, but I think it's certainly everyone else on the panel here is like as familiar with those issues and working to to heal and get to those places where it can be a lot more constructive. So hopefully it's answering the question mostly.
No, I think so. So I'm going to move on to Kirby, and she's doing some really awesome work with urban farming, which is something I'm super passionate about as well. And community building and sort of like healing through seeds. So I want to hear like her perspective, what she's doing in particular, what you're seeing other people doing if you are, and just kind of take it from there.
Yeah, so Detroit is a really amazing place. It's full of beautiful urban Indigenous folks that come from all different walks and are focusing on different aspects of food sovereignty. For me, my farm is called Sheshu, which means butterfly in Shinket. And it's about like the transformative power that our seed relatives grant us every day. I think, Noah, what you said about trauma and seeds just like has me shook. And I think part of our role as seed keepers is to be in communion with these seeds and really move the narrative past trauma, because it's not stagnant. There is healing for our communities and these seeds. So thank you for bringing that up. But yeah, I am working on bringing an urban Indigenous food access point to Detroit and working with a few other farmers and mostly like up in the UP, Upper Peninsula of Michigan. On bringing all these staple products to the folks in the community here for free, because food is medicine at the end of the day, and my work heavily relies on having a sense of abundance be granted to people who have had that taken away from them. I'm also a part of the I Collective, which Liz helped found. And I also love all the ways, like Rowan, I got some of the robin's egg corn from Carlos in Colorado, and he shared stories about that seed and how it ties in with your work. And that's really why I love seeds so much, is because they create a chain that's unbreakable. And a lot of our culture has been not taken, because it's still here, but it's been shaken in a lot of ways. And seeds bind us together in an infinite amount of ways. And yeah, and that's also why I love doing it in the city, but being able to like bring in seeds from all across Turtle Island and have their story continue here with me and be able to look after them. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kirby. So this kind of, all this talk about the diversity of seeds and how people are coming together with communities just reminds me that this is so universal, right? Like, it's not just indigenous to America, like it's really important to like save seeds around the world. We have a question from Miriam asking, what kind of seeds are you talking about? And I'll expand on that a little bit by saying, like, what reasons do you pick certain seeds? And maybe like seeds that go together and climate and all these things are important. And I'm gonna throw that over to Rowan to talk about that and just kind of like, I know it's very complicated, that's a huge question, but we maybe tackle that.
Well, you know, I'll take us back a little ways, and I'll invite all of us to remember that each and every one of us descends from people who have beautiful, rich, and storied relationships with food and land, every single one of us. And all of us, in some capacity, in this time of cultural insanity, are living in a diaspora, are living disconnected from this rich, storied cosmology that we're all intertwined into. And so if I hear the question right, like why are the certain seeds in my bundle, my ancestral bundle? Well, that takes me all the way back to our creation stories, and these seeds, the corn and the beans and the squash and the strawberries and the tobacco and the original potatoes, those actually were given to us by the body of the daughter of original woman, like one of our original ancestors. Those foods sprouted from her body as like her dying wish to give us sustenance that would continue to sustain us through the generations, right? And so inside of those seeds and inside of the earth of our body are these agreements that our ancestors came into an agreement with the plant relatives and said, we're going to take care of each other, as Liz was saying. And so those seeds carry those stories. And every single season when we renew our land and gardens and our bundles, when we look at those seeds, when we look at all these different beautiful corns and beans, we're reminded of where we sit in the circle of our relatives inside of those stories, that creation story, they never ended. The creation story never ended. It just keeps unfurling and unfurling. And we're a part of that in this time. All of us are. But many of us maybe have just tattered little bits of memory of what that is. But what I will say is true is that if you look to maybe some of your ancestors, no matter where they resided, and you follow the thread of connection and inquiry and curiosity, and figure out what was the seeds of your ancestors, like that same question I asked myself, then when you hold those seeds and when you eat those seeds and when you sing to those seeds and you begin to engage in that relationship with those seeds, you will awaken inside of your blood and your bones the memory of those agreements. And it's such a beautiful thing. I witness it all the time because I get to share and teach people about seed saving. There's a sparkle that people get in their eye. There's a beauty that kind of overtakes people when they have the corn in their hand and they're like, oh, I know this. I'm remembering, like I'm putting things back together again that were once taken away from us, right? And so that's the invitation I have for all of you who are listening, is follow the threads of ancestry inside of your own blood and your bones and find out what are the seeds that fed your ancestors. And may those seeds begin to populate your seed bundle, and may you begin to restore those relationships with those seeds. Because when you do, I guarantee you, it's like the most amazing journey. You will learn so much about yourself. You will restore your faith in humanity and in your ancestors. And you'll begin to learn about all these amazing stories that actually teach us how to be good people, right? And that will move us in the direction of cultural sanity again, which again, we're in a time of cultural insanity. And so how can we move ourselves more towards that future that Noah speaks about, that future, that beautiful future that we all want for ourselves and our children? Sometimes the seeds and the food and the land can guide us to that place. So that's kind of how I choose my seeds, is through these old ancestral connections and learning how to find them in that way. So
thank you, Rowan. So I have a question. I'm going to pose it to Noah, and if you don't know, that's fine. We can pose it to someone else, but we sort of alluded to this earlier. There's so many creative ways that seeds were saved over time in history and in our past. Can you maybe talk about some of the ways that folks have done seed saving, in the past? And I'm talking, more of like, when seeds were sort of taken from Native folks as opposed to like more recently. And if you have any stories to share about that.
Yeah, I mean, So, sorry, just to clarify, like seed.
Yeah. So for example, like I know like sewn into clothing and things like that, but do you have any other, and again, if that's too complicated of a question, I can.
No, it's not too complicated. I think there's just a lot,
right.
It's going to be different for every
Maybe just
community in
pick
terms.
one interesting tidbit about that and kind of expand.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like, I'm trying.
I know, I'm sorry to put you on the spot. We hadn't talked about this before.
Oh, no, you're totally fine. I'm just trying to think about like what's the quickest way to answer it. I can give you a long rambling answer, but I don't want to be here all day. But yeah, I mean, I just think like there's, I think a lot of like what we do today is not that different from what folks, have traditionally done for seed keeping. And there's different materials I think that are used, but in the Southwest, it's really common that people had specific pots. In the Southeast, gourds in particular are also like a very common way to find storage. And then you find places, just traditionally people understood like keeping those seeds cool and keeping those seeds in places where they're going to be stored and alive for a long time. And then also that they're not stuck to just an individual. They're always a part of a community of people who maintained those seeds. And that's, one big problem we have today that I always like to talk about is like with corn, like there's a lot of inbreeding because people are growing small little patches and smaller and smaller and smaller to the point where a lot of our corns, I know from the Native Seed Search collection, probably half of the corn in this collection is inbred at this point. And that's not something you can easily fix. Once that's happened, it's something you need to be growing probably about, at least 100, really 200, 300 corn plants in your field every time. And then even then, historically, so much of it was about, if one community had a bad season, well, there was another one not so far away that you could trade seed with and, adapt your seeds. Like the trade and exchange and combination of seeds together, is still in like living memory of like there's processes and protocols and ceremonies by which people, ensured the health and longevity and vitality of all these seeds that we sort of care for and steward. So, I think some ways you could get into like all the technicalities of like what kinds of pots and things like that. But I think more generally, like it was like seed saving used to be like just such a central part of your daily life. And it's a part of like everyday life in Indigenous cultures throughout, and then, throughout world cultures. You can even go to how like the Bible is just a calendar for, like farming. And, I don't know a single, tradition and culture that isn't fundamentally settled, centered around the maintenance and relationship, like Rowan was saying, to seeds or to the foods and wild animals and plants that we have a covenant and relationship with. And that's such a really special thing. So hopefully that answers your question.
No, it's such a broad thing. I should have maybe thought that out better before asking that, but thank you. I really appreciate that. I know it's a very complicated question. But I'm gonna go on to Liz, and I have a question for you about the growing of seeds. What is a really good lesson you learned from growing seeds? Like, for example, was there a seed that was giving you a hard time? Were there seeds that flourished together really well in unexpected ways? Things like that.
That's a really great question. So the biggest lesson I've learned from growing seeds is that I'm going to learn something new every single time. Nothing ever goes exactly the way I expect it to. And another lesson that I've learned is that the seeds, the plants really require your time and attention. They don't do well if you don't have enough time to really be out in the fields tending them. There have been years where I've been able to be in my garden every single day and my plants do wonderful and I get really great produce. And then there are years where, I might only be able to get to my crop once a week and they don't do as well. And again, that goes back to that give and take of a relationship. I'm only going to get what I put into the relationship. Yeah, I guess like I mentioned, the biggest lesson is that I'm always going to learn something new every single year. The seeds have a lot to teach us.
Oops, muted. Thanks so much for that, Liz. I have another question for Kirby right now. So what is a fundamental way in which you have, I guess changed is maybe not the correct word, but sort of grown with seeds and learned from them as you've sort of taken this journey?
Yeah, I mean, what haven't I learned, honestly? And I still feel like I'm in elementary school with growing, but that's also very freeing for me. When I had my first garden, when I was actually in elementary school, I was told to encourage the seeds to grow. And of course, I took this to the extreme, and I would not leave their side no matter what. As soon as I'd get home from school, I was lying next to them, just giving them some words of encouragement. And I didn't remember this memory until last year, when I was told by a mentor that I needed to be speaking to Anishinaabe plants in Anishinaabe so that they would be able to understand their name. And that care and that time and that effort that Liz just spoke of, you do really get out what you put into it. And I see it every time. And that's the greatest lesson that plants have taught me, is that there's an abundance of generosity in this universe, and that our ancestors have shown us, and we are able to continue that and to push it into the future. And these seeds are here because somebody cared about us in our existence. And to continue that just feels like an honor. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kirby. That's really lovely. And yeah, it's a really cool way to think about that, these seeds are here because someone cared about us. And so it's sort of up to us to kind of push that forward as well. So I am going to leave some time right now to do a call to action. And I'm going to have each of our panelists sort of give something that they think that, we can do as individuals or as groups to continue the work of seed saving. So I'm going to actually start with Noah. I'm going to switch up the order a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, once again, there's a lot of things people can do for, saving seeds and things like that. My number one thing that's just a mundane little piece, but is labeling. Like, I'm the first person to recognize, like you think you're gonna remember like what that bag of seeds was. You're not. You're gonna forget it very quickly. You plant an area in your garden, you're like, oh, I'll just write this down this afternoon. No, you got to label it right there. You can't hold all the information in your head. And I say that also because I work in a seed bank, and so many times I come across seeds that have no information about them. And what a huge loss, because those seeds carry with them stories and so much human connection that Rowan was talking about, and Liz has talked about, and Kirby, everyone's talked about, the fact that these seeds carry with them so much more than just themselves as material objects. Like, they carry with them so many relationships that if you don't, find ways, even if you're not, writing it down, you find ways that you remember that and hold that information in your heart or on a piece of paper, which is usually how I need to do it. But like, that's really important. And like, to me, like oftentimes people like, want to hear about the technicalities of seed saving. And yes, we can get into a lot of like, techniques for drying and like different processes for, ensuring like longevity in freezers and things like that. But so many great seed keepers just keep them in mason jars and a shelf in their garage. And the one universal in every situation to me is like labeling and the maintenance and continuation of who gave you these seeds, where did they come from, what's their true original name? What are the protocols that need to go with them? That's all really important. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. So just detailed record keeping, which is, sort of, I guess, Kirby said it well, it's not lost, but it's sort of, we need to just kind of uncover that a little bit. So then I'll go on to Liz. What's your advice for individuals, groups, whatever, in sort of continuing the seed keeping tradition?
So my advice is that no seed keeping effort is too small. Just find a seed that you love and build that relationship with it. Even if you only grow one thing, really work on that relationship. Every seed that we save is a victory. It's life for our future generations. So short and sweet.
No, I love that. And I will say too, that we're going to open it up to questions after this in a few minutes. So if folks want to throw some questions in the chat, I will moderate that and ask them at the very end. So we'll move on to Kirby now. What's some advice you have for individuals, groups, whatever, for seed keeping in the future?
Yeah, I'd have to say, so it's like a kind of a two-part answer. I think that finding a seed relative that speaks to you and being able to share that with others ultimately is the goal. There is, of course, like protocol and traditions and things you have to be aware of, but as long as those things are all in order, to be able to give that seed agency is very important. And then ultimately just defending the land, protecting the waterways, because that's what's going to ensure that these seeds that feed us are going to thrive. And I think that gets maybe lost in the conversation sometimes, but extremely vital to growing. Yeah.
And I actually do have one more question for anyone to really answer on this. So I know that obviously like a lot of seeds from the Americas are used all over the world, like chili peppers are such a good example of that. Potatoes, obviously. Do you grow seeds from other places, or do you just stick to indigenous? And that's a big question, and maybe I don't know if anyone has an answer to that, and maybe not right now, but anyone
Answer real quick.
There we go.
I've talked about, I love okra. It's like been a part of my family for hundreds of years. I have, and I love the story behind okra as well, which tells, this meeting and coming together of, escaped African peoples who then joined indigenous nations, and makes me think about, our Afro-Indigenous relatives. Way back in my family tree, I have Afro-Indigenous family, and that relation to that okra really makes me think about those connections. And then I just can't imagine what a meal without, stewed okra or fried okra would be like for my family. Like, that's just so core. It's as important to me as beans and corn, and it's such a special plant. Like, it's beautiful. I feel extremely drawn to it just as a being. And so, that's an example of, to me as well, that, like, we brought new relatives into our communities, and we can celebrate that and honor that. And just because it isn't strictly pre-Columbian, like pre-Columbian's a colonial concept as well. Like, why does Columbus get to decide like what's authentic and not authentic? And let's honor and celebrate all these incredible foods that we've made our own. Also, I'll just briefly add too, like at the Native Seed Search collection, there's incredible melons, the Total Otham, like have adapted, and incredible, like mustards and like different things that like came from either the Spanish or African peoples coming into the Southwest, and a little bit of Anglo influence as well in a couple varieties. But are we going to say that those aren't like a part of our communities? Like, they're so essential, and especially adapted like to, very particular communities, that I just feel like that's a really special thing.
And to your point as well, Native Americans aren't a monolith, and guess what? Corn's from what, Peru, and so to have it then all the way up here, that could be wrong. I'm not a seed person, but to have them then all the way up here, those are many different nations you have to go in between, and many different, how many hundreds, thousands of variations of corn from different countries, basically, So yeah. So Rowan, also, I wanted to get her call to action in. I didn't mean to skip her. I just thought of that question. So I wanted to kind of get that in and little conversation going around that. So Rowan, please take the floor.
Oh yeah, thank you. My call to action is actually right now. I just want us all to, I know we're all landing from different places, so I want us all to come together. And in a Haudenosaunee practice, we like put our hearts and our minds together. And so we have this opportunity right now. There's some reason why you ended up here in this space, taking a little time to think about seed and plant relatives. And so I want us to imagine ourselves in this circle together so that we can reconnect to, I think, the call to action that the seeds are actually asking of us in this time, that we are at a time, and again, a great precipice of change, great cultural upheaval and change. And the seeds continue to come to us and ask us to rehydrate and renew our relationships to them. And this is a message that has been continually rebirthed and renewed season after season since time immemorial. And again, all of us descend from those people. And so I want us to be here together in that prayer and that renewed commitment, that when we leave this space, when we leave this circle tonight, that we will begin to think about the ways in which the reseeding of people is happening right now, that there's like a kerneling or a sort of a seeding of this movement that, even in the 25 years that I've been in this movement, I've seen it grown exponentially, just like seeds themselves, and that many more of us are coming to the land to heal and are allowing our ancestral brilliance to heal our intergenerational trauma that we carry, that we're allowing that to come through at us by imbibing the seeds and growing the seeds. And so I want us to sit here for a brief moment, and I want us to imagine all of our ancestors who are with us. They're all with us, around us at all times. And I want us to call them in, and I want us to think about the ways in which we can make renewed commitment in this time, and perhaps ask ourselves that question I seeded already as we reseed ourselves. What are the seeds that fed our ancestors? And so that's the invitation, is that you follow that thread of relationship and you tend to that place inside yourself that longs to be connected and woven into that story of seeds. And that's the call to action tonight, is that we honor the legacy of those ancestors and all that they did so that we would have good food to eat. And we honor the agreements that those seeds made to us a long, long time ago, that they would continue to feed us. And I tell you this right now, if you ate today, if you had any kind of food today or yesterday, the seeds never forgot about their commitment to take care of you, right? Because they continue to feed you. And so it's our turn and our time, even though some of us have had to abdicate our relationship to seeds by violence and theft and disconnection and diaspora, that we take a moment right now to renew our connection to be good future ancestors, to remember all that the seeds do to take care of us. And we make that renewed connection, even if, like Liz said, it's just one plant that you tend, or if you don't even have a plot to tend, this movement of seed sovereignty needs all of us. We need poets, we need artists, we need lawyers, we need teachers, we need mothers to begin to reseed the people, because I have a vision, and many of us in the circle have a vision, that one day in the long haul of the work we're doing, and this will be fruit born on limbs beyond our time, that we will grow a culture that is capable of holding this understanding that seeds are our relatives, and the Indigenous relatives around this circle already understand that and know that. And maybe we can create a culture that loves seeds as people and relatives, and we begin to act accordingly, and that begins to ripple out in our culture. And so we can do that right now in this moment, as we can make that renewed connection in community and in circle tonight. So thank you for touching into those ancestors that are around you, and for making that renewed promise to those descendants who are looking to you to be that good future ancestor to give something down to them that's nourishing and beautiful. So thank you.
Rowan, that was incredible, and what a great call to action. Thank you so much, and I really feel that everyone is really feeling that right now. Do you want to take just a moment of silence for this and just kind of sit with this for a moment, and then we can kind of finish up? Okay, so let's just take a few minutes to kind of just sort of soak that in. Thank you. So I just want to thank everyone for participating tonight, for, checking us out. I know, people have busy lives and the weather's nice in some places, not maybe here in Brooklyn. And so you took time out of your day to, sort of spend time with us and to listen to stories and to kind of think about ways you can do things in the future. So we'll put any resources that we have, online, and you can access if you want to, contact us or some of the speakers through MOFAD. With their permission, we can potentially connect you to them if you have any further questions. I just want to say again, thank you to all the panelists for taking time out of your busy schedules and days. I know, you're doing all this work and you're talking about all the things you're doing. So I really, appreciate everyone taking the time tonight and being really intentional about sort of being here and being present in this moment. So thank you very much. And I think we can end on that note. Okay, thank you. There will be an email sent out with any information. And again, this recording will be available for later viewing. So if you missed parts of it, and if you just want to watch it again because it was so great, then we'll have that available for you as well. Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.